Usually there's three of us here. Our guest today is math.
It is. Yeah.
Math
we have
programs.
plenty of it, don't we?
Oh my goodness. And it's such a confusing topic for people. We know we need to learn it, but there's just so much to talk about, and so we wanted to invite different math programs here, and we've got some new ones we'll get to eventually, right?
Yes, we have a couple of new ones in particular, and that follow kind of the same methodology. So, in fact, we've been seeing several new ones in the past several years, and
that are all a similar method, right?
Yes.
You know, I just figured math was math, and honestly, I didn't care for it much.
Right.
Growing up, it was a real struggle for me. But as I started working on this side of teaching, I found out that there's a lot of different ways to learn math.
Exactly.
And I didn't, that was a surprise to me, and I think a lot of times it's a surprise to parents because they'll take one program, it's not working, then next year they'll try the other one that's real popular.
Right.
And so how do we choose math programs? How do you guys choose them? What are the criteria for that?
I think it's really good for parents to think about what they need in a curriculum and definitely what their child needs in a curriculum. So things like, do they need a scripted teacher book that tells them exactly how to teach, or a program that is more tailored to homeschoolers instead of a classroom? Or does their child need color or consumable workbooks? And so there's all kinds of things to think about. But I know as you and I were talking this week about math, we kind of thought about, so there's sequential and spiral programs. And then we
all these words.
Exactly, yes. And then there's also procedural and conceptual math.
Okay. And if that sounds like Latin to you, let's work through that, because that's what this is. I didn't realize all of those things. So we can use the family way to kind of help us with the things like, do I need a script? Do I need these kinds of things? But as far as the way the math is taught, those are the words that you're talking about.
Right, exactly.
And so which of those four words, let's slow down and look through those. Which of those four words are the ones that we talk about first?
Yeah, so I know we get a lot of questions about, I've heard mastery, and I've heard spiral. What's the difference, and what would be best for my child? And so mastery, I think it's more just sequential, because everybody wants to master math, right? I mean, that's their goal.
Right. So no matter what program, you're going to be a math master, hopefully, right?
So I look at it as more sequential, where you're staying on one topic at a time before moving on to another. So let's say you've got a chapter on addition, and then you move to subtraction, and so on. So you really go in depth in that topic before moving on to another one.
For me, visually, I envision, those long staircases that are usually in front of public buildings, and you take a step up, and then you walk for a little bit, and then you take another step up.
That's a really good analogy.
I think in pictures, so that's helpful for me to understand what mastery math looks like. And some of those stairs are really long, right? Some programs spend a long time there, and some of them spend a shorter time and might come back and review in a different way.
Yes, there are programs that do involve more review than others. But.
Okay. And so you mentioned spiral, though.
Yes, so that's different. If you think of a spiral staircase, spiral is
scared me to death.
Yes. Right. So a spiral math program tends to be where you are learning a concept and it's spread out over time and in small increments.
Okay.
So let's say you learn a little bit of addition, and then you have some more new concepts, and then 5 lessons later you go more in depth on addition while continually reviewing. Okay. So you have continuous review, and you're diving into a little bit at a time.
Okay. So it's typically more small pieces of math?
More step by step, small increments.
Bite-sized pieces. Okay.
And some programs will have a new concept that they might introduce in every lesson, and others will stay on one concept a little bit longer than others, but
and different learners would want different kinds of math,
Exactly.
potentially. So some kids do well if they're just focused
Sticking
on
on one.
topic for a long length of time, right?
Right.
Or a longer length of
Yes.
time. And some kids will
like that
Like-
continual review. They
Right.
need that. Yeah. So that is a really good thing to think about.
And so when you're choosing them, that's probably the first step you need to look at, right?
Right.
And we have a couple we have some new math programs here, but we also have some ones that have been around for a long time that fit in that category.
That's right.
So I'm going to dig here on the products that we've got. This one is from Math UC, and we pulled all the first levels, right?
Yes,
of the programs.
Yes, and the reason we did that is because our new math programs that we're going to look at are the first level. So
Right.
that's
And it might be either PK or it might be kindergarten,
Right.
or in one case we've got a first grade,
right.
or
So-
book one, right? And so this is Math UC, and they use these rods. I'm going to use the wrong term, but they use the manipulatives special to their program. And so when we talk about Master Your Spiral, where is this going?
So that is a very mastery-based program.
Okay,
Where
so
they're focusing on.
We're going to move this over
Yep.
here on this side.
Okay.
Okay. So that's our mastery end of this table. And why is it, you said very mastery?
Because they're kind of zoning in on one concept a year. While they're bringing in a few other concepts, they're mostly zoning in like on addition and subtraction one year, and then maybe multiplication the next year and division.
whole year.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
And so
it's-
if you're coming in or out of that program, that's something to be aware of when
Sure.
you go to something that might spend less time on that.
Exactly.
So that
Yeah.
step is really long,
Yes.
right? Okay.
That's
All right. Then we've got, here's Saxon. And this is the kindergarten, right?
it is, and
And
then
then
you've got
this
the
is-
first grade.
Oh, this is the first
And the
grade.
reason they
Here.
look a little different in size is because the kindergarten one mostly works with manipulatives. It does not have workbooks. You don't get the workbooks until first grade.
Right.
And then Horizon, of course, is another one that it has workbooks in kindergarten, very colorful. But those are both spiral-based programs that are kind of on the other end of the spectrum. So.
Yes, and so they're going to stay over here on this side just
Right.
as a visual representation. So they will do that very tight review and then
Yes.
introduce something and then come back
And
on that,
right.
right?
Exactly.
And their goal is in that method that they're going to be very automatic in those skills,
Right.
because you've reviewed and reviewed and
Right.
reviewed. And then on this side, mastery or
Sequential is the
Sequential.
icon that we use
Yeah,
for it.
yeah. It's the same
basically, It's
idea.
kind of used interchangeably, but sequential would be probably a better word to just understand what that means.
Yeah,
That-
because you're following a sequence, you're
Right.
going step by step by step.
Right.
Right. But when you hear it from other publishers or from a publisher themselves, they might use
Right,
that
they
term
might
mastery.
use
So
mastery.
it's interchangeable.
Right.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. But we had those two terms, and then we had two other ones
Yes.
to complicate it further,
Yes,
right?
so we talked about math being procedural or conceptual.
Okay, now that
And-
sounds complicated.
Yeah,
right?
and when I first started homeschooling, I had no idea I picked a math program and we just did it, and then we supplemented where we needed to. So intuitively, I guess I supplemented. But procedural math is basically, it's very direct, step by step. You have routines and rules. There's a process to get the answer.
Right.
So like, take 87 minus 69. So
Okay.
they would say, okay, you can't take 9 from 7, so you have to borrow from the 8 and make it 17, then you can take 17 minus 9, and so on.
Okay.
So a conceptual program will focus more on why you're doing this.
Okay.
So if you're learning 87 minus 69, they might use manipulatives or a diagram or drawing to show you that, okay, let's look at 87.
What is 87 made up
Yeah,
of?
so it's 8 tens and 7 ones. So we can take one of these 10s from the 8 and break it into ones and make it 17. So that's kind of the difference between the conceptual and procedural.
Right, right. And I think a lot of parents learned that procedural way.
Right.
At least I know that was the method that I learned.
Exactly, I did too.
There's one
Yes.
way to do it, and they follow these steps.
Right.
So you remember those steps. Right.
And and curriculum designers, they have their, some might think, oh, it's better for kids to learn procedurally and then the why will come later. Others will say, no, they need to know the how right away. So, and I think that both are equally important. So, and some programs are more procedural and some are more conceptual. I think they both probably have conceptual and procedural in them for teaching math. But one might lean more conceptually and one might lean more procedurally in
And I
teaching.
think you're going to find that more in the elementary levels, that
Exactly.
Divergence, right?
Yes.
Because as you get into higher level math,
Right.
you're going to be talking about the concepts
Right.
more and conceptualize what's happening there. You
Exactly.
get more theoretical and you
Right.
understand what's happening. But it's really shows itself very very adamantly
It does in
these
the
lower,
younger.
in the lower.
And parents might be thinking, well, what would my kid like? Would my child like more procedural or more conceptual? And I think just direct, straightforward thinkers like the procedural more, like give me
Yeah.
the example, let me do it.
Yeah.
Kids
Let me
that,
follow the steps.
Yes, let me follow the steps. Kids that want to know the big picture of things and problem solve, they might like the more conceptual.
There are children that just want to understand. I don't understand why we're doing that.
Yeah.
Right? Now,
Yeah.
do you find that the programs over here that are more spiral, do they tend to be more procedural overall?
I think so. I think they work more on just practicing and those basic math facts. And conceptual math, they'll teach the math facts, but I don't think they necessarily drill them as much as like a spiral program or procedural program will.
It won't be 100% of the time, but typically that's the connection, right? The ones that are more mastery based are going to be a little bit more conceptual.
Or sequential, yeah. And I was talking to a teacher friend of mine, and she teaches 5th grade math and science, and she was saying, well, Gina, I've just found that there really is no perfect curriculum, so I just look at what the curriculum does. I bring in supplements when I need to, and I said, that's exactly right in the homeschool curriculum world, too. I mean, there is no perfect curriculum.
So give yourself some grace on that. I mean, I think one of our consultants, Sarah, says, like, if it's 80% good for you, then you can finagle it. You can add in the 20% that's missing, or you feel like is not quite meeting your specific situation and need, right? But you're not going to find it 100%.
Exactly.
Probably.
Right. So if you like more of a conceptual program and you feel like you're not getting enough drill, your child isn't learning those basic math facts, you want them to be fluent in math, right?
Yes.
And so you
it's
want
a language.
So you want those math facts to be, you want to create automaticity in that.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of kids struggle with Algebra 1 because they're not fluent in the reducing and converting fractions, decimals, and percents.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Just the
That
same
was a
with
problem.
learning multiplication help with division. So it's I just feel like that's a really important step. And if you feel like your program isn't drilling enough, I mean, there's so many supplements you can bring in if you still like that conceptual side of things.
Right. And we've got. So now we have our two little islands, right? We've got the two sides. And our catalog will show the different aspects of that. But this is essentially the crux, the main points to decide on first, how you want to approach.
And a lot of programs will have, especially in the younger years, the beginning, they'll have the manipulatives that that will be hands-on, like Saxon, for instance. very manipulative based for kindergarten through third grade.
Yeah.
But then not so much in the older levels where, a primary math or Singapore math uses the manipulatives throughout sixth grade. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Why do you think or what do you feel like the benefits are of manipulatives at the lower grades?
Yeah, well, you've got that concrete. I think that kids that age need that concrete, that they need that hands-on to really understand what they're trying to,
what's happening.
Right, the concept really well.
Yeah, and so you'll have
Right, they
tools
need to
like
see
these that you are adding, or however you're going to represent
Right.
this division kind of concept, right? And then they start at that very concrete, and then they move to the term is
Right.
escaping me.
Depending on what program you use. I mean, some might use more pictorial representations, and then abstract, where they're solving with symbols and equations, and not using so much the manipulatives and the pictorial. So I mean the idea is to get there abstractly, but I think small children do benefit greatly from the manipulatives.
Right.
So.
I've talked to families who say that their child is just, they can do it in their head, and so they've moved beyond this tangible aspect to more concepts in their head.
Right.
And so at some point, sometimes they will need to be able to document
Exactly.
the work that they're
Right.
doing, in their head. And so it's a gift that we have so many choices.
It is, yeah.
To teach, especially in the elementary. It
Right.
seems like the last few years, the options for elementary
boy.
math have just
Yeah,
exploded.
They really have.
Right. And so we have so many choices that I feel like going through the family way and also looking at how the math is taught and explained
Right.
will really help you not feel like you're just in a whirlwind of
Absolutely.
decisions. Yeah.
Yes.
Because it gets so confusing after
Right.
a little bit of time.
It sure does.
Right.
Yeah. Should we dive into some of these new the two new
I
programs?
think so.
we have
Yeah.
and
Let's
compare
look
those
at
with-
let's look at some.
Yeah. What our two new programs are the All About Math and the Simply Charlotte Mason Math.
Yeah.
And these are both sequential and
let's show this
conceptual.
off a little bit.
Yeah.
There is a bunny rabbit on the front. This probably looks familiar because it looks like All About Reading.
Right. All about reading, all about spelling. So if you've heard of All About Reading, All About Spelling,
Stickers.
you'll be very familiar with this book. So the teacher manual is set up the exact same way. It has talks about the
I help you?
manipulatives. Yeah, if you
Okay.
want to. And
Sure.
in each lesson, you'll see a before you begin, where it's going to show you what you need, the objectives of the lesson, what you need to be prepared. And then if you turn the page,
Okay.
you'll
Slowly. There we go.
have the review, which will be from the daily tracker and the student book. And the daily tracker is basically what your student has mastered and what they still need to learn.
Okay.
So you can take some review from that. And then the new teaching, where you're going to use the manipulatives, and then you're going to use the activity sheets and the student guide. So if you want to turn the page on there.
Okay.
You'll see the new teaching lasts quite a long, a couple pages there.
Okay.
And then you have
But
math.
it's all scripted, right?
It is. It's all
Okay.
scripted. You'll see the activity sheets here, the answer key there. Math reflection is just oral questions, just to make sure that your student is retaining what they're learning. So that's
I like
really
that.
nice.
Yeah.
And then some optional extended practice is always in every lesson. And then if you turn the page one more time,
Okay.
you'll have the Brenda's Math Fun, which is just extra games as well to just reinforce those concepts.
Okay.
So-
Do they do this at the end of the day, or maybe
at the end of the lesson? But remember, there's 60 lessons, so you're probably not going to get through a lesson a day.
Okay.
You go 20 minutes, and then you just pick up where you left off the next
Okay.
day.
Okay.
So-
That's good to know.
Right.
I like that 20-minute time frame.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're all about done by
Right,
the time
at that time, especially at that age,
this
right?
age. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's set up pretty nicely. It's very conceptual. It teaches really good number sense. It's not grade leveled. So
That's what I was going to
Yes.
ask you. What age are we talking about here?
So the publisher says that it includes kindergarten material with some of first grade material. Now, level 2 will be out later this summer, and that's going to include first grade material and some second grade material as well.
Okay.
And then level 3, 4, and 5 will come out next year, hopefully, and those are mostly like level 3, third grade material and so on.
Where are they going to end? Do you know if they'll end at elementary level, like grade 5
They
or so?
plan on 5 levels.
Okay.
Yep. So, and then they have a manipulative kit that is for all the
This is
levels.
part of it.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you
All right.
purchase that, you'll just have like a one-time purchase, and it will be used for all the levels.
That's nice. But
Yeah,
you
yeah.
one and done kind of
Exactly.
situation. All right.
Right.
Because some of these look familiar to other curriculum
Right.
that's used, the teddy bears and these
Yes.
blocks here, right?
Right. So I think there's 7 different items in there. So,
Okay.
and then
Very
it comes
nice.
in a nice tote, so you can even keep. Let's see, we have some. Let's see. They're right under that book
Yeah,
there.
these cards here.
Yes, and you can keep those in the tote, and they're just extra little manipulatives that you can
Okay.
use. And then,
More rabbits.
exactly. And if you want to
Counting.
hold up this one is
Sure.
the 3 read strategy they do. So they talk
Tell me
about, okay, what
this.
did you read? What are the numbers saying, and how are we going to solve this problem?
Well, I like that.
They kind of use that through their problem solving.
I like this progression.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
So I will say the scope and sequence is a little narrower than other. Now I use that word scope and sequence. Let's explain what that is.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask you.
So when I say scope and sequence, I mean all that means is it tells you what is going to be taught in that level and in what order.
And I think that's really important to know because not every math program will cover everything.
Exactly.
Like there are some that don't talk about telling time.
Right.
On an analog clock, for
Right.
example, and maybe that's not important to you, or you can do that at home. You can
Right.
teach that
That's
concept
a
at
very
home,
good point.
right? But some programs like Saxon will work very much on that and
Right.
calendar and time. Right.
Exactly, and that's why it's important if you're switching math programs to be very aware that the scope and sequence of every program is a lot different.
Right.
So you'll want to take that placement test if you're, going from one to another.
Right, because you might miss something.
Right.
Or you might be duplicating something you've done
Exactly.
a lot already. So we kind of harp on that here.
We do.
If you're wanting to change, take the test.
Yes.
Or have the,
Just so
we don't
you
like to
know.
give our kids
Right.
tests, but
Right.
so you are comfortable with the content.
Exactly.
You recognize.
And your child's not frustrated and
Yeah, I'm all for that. And then also, usually those placement tests will give you a feel for what
That's a really
way
good
the concepts are presented and how the language they're going to use, because some of these
Right.
programs have different terminology
that's
for
true.
the same thing.
Yeah, to kind of give you a
Right.
good feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this program is, I mentioned it has a narrower scope and sequence. So they start with subitizing.
Okay, that's a fancy word.
Yeah, so what that means, all that means is that you are, when you're subitizing small objects, you're recognizing quantities without counting them.
Yeah.
So you can recognize that's a group of 5.
So I got 6 here.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I may or
So-
may not have had to count them, but if I could just visualize them,
Exactly,
that's
that's what
subitizing,
they're
right?
wanting
Okay.
you to do. They're
Okay.
teaching simple addition and subtraction. They're comparing numbers, finding the missing number, understanding less than greater than. They're ordering 2-digit numbers and comparing, and they're adding 2-digit numbers with base 10 blocks and drawings.
So in this level, they're getting to 2-digit numbers. Okay,
Right.
that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So, and the things that are not in here that you might see in an early program are lessons on shape, calendar, time, money, tallies, weight, and capacity.
Okay, so it's really working on using the numbers and seeing them and
Yes.
working through those digits. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
that's really helpful to know because what the focus
right.
is.
Yes, it's definitely focusing on developing that number sense. So,
Which is a key element
Right.
of math, honestly. So they're going to start there, and then perhaps later on down the road,
right.
they might
I'm not
do
sure
some
of
of
the
those
scope and
others.
sequence yet of level 2. I do know. I think that they're introducing time, maybe, but I'm really not sure.
Yeah.
Another thing that another consultant brought out is that they're not teaching like number formation, like how to make, learn your numbers. But
Right.
But I think they feel like that's usually in your handwriting program, or you're doing that, organically, or so
So
that's
you're basically working through with the manipulatives and doing some things with
Right.
the activity book with
Right.
this, but there won't be a lot of hand
yes,
writing skills.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
You got it.
Very cool. All right.
And
So if we talk about this was, is this spiral or is this
No, that would be sequential.
sequential? Okay. So it'd be over here on this side.
Right.
Of the
Should we put it over there?
Sure. Let's put it over there. And it's also working on the concepts, right? The
Right.
conceptual versus procedural.
Okay.
For the most part.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And then this one's extremely popular, but it's not new to us.
Right.
But the Math with Confidence, if we were to put this in a category, well, we've got our little icons
Right.
on here already. So we've got this as sequential mastery
Right.
based.
But it is going to bring in some review, but it is mostly sequential where, it's focusing on a topic and before
And
moving on to another.
So that goes over here on this side.
Right.
As
Now,
well.
that will have a broader scope and sequence, than this. It's going to work on subitizing. It's going to work on reading clocks with hands to the hour, the base 10 system, working with 10 frames, giving directions, following directions, symmetry, money,
Wow.
sorting, comparing
Lots of
heights.
different
Yes,
things
so
going
it's
on.
really going to have a lot in there, months and days of the week. It does have a good presentation of number bonds, and it does have that emphasis on mental math too. So it is very conceptual as well. But you can see that the teacher guide really is the heart of the program. It's very
Yeah.
game oriented too. It even has
Yeah. Look at the
suggestions
difference
for
on this.
books you can get to kind of hit
Oh,
on.
to reinforce ideas
right.
and things? Yeah.
So you can kind of see how colorful and nice that is.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah, and this is the first level, the kinder
Right.
level.
Yeah.
Right?
So-
Okay, cool. That one comes up so much that it's nice to compare it with the others.
It is,
Because,
it comes up a lot.
yeah, almost every day. All
Right.
of these kinds
They
of
do,
things are.
yeah.
And this other new one
So yeah, that's
is this. This is it.
yeah.
For one level.
$1 open
Yes,
to go, right?
Right. Hardcover bound. This is called Book 1. And so they do equate it with first grade. It's called the Charlotte Mason Elementary Arithmetic Series.
Okay.
This is a unique math program.
It looks like it.
Yeah.
It looks very, like from the early 1900s maybe.
Right. It's a very straightforward text. They will use some manipulatives, but they're all kinds of things that you can use in the house.
Okay.
Maybe like popsicle sticks.
Or beans.
Beans.
Or,
your-
okay. Money,
whatever.
real money. Or,
Real money,
okay.
yeah. What you're counting. And so it starts at perhaps what you think might be started in kindergarten. But
Okay.
because it's Charlotte Mason, they're recommending real natural learning
Sure,
in the
okay.
kinder years. And so then by the time you get to first grade, then
Okay.
let's we're going to roll up our sleeves a little bit and engage with this process. So it is very high teacher involvement. Every book will have this in the front. It'll have what's covered in what term. You'll notice the progression there.
Okay.
That's really helpful because you're working on those things so many weeks.
Okay.
And then, but I can't read it. It's small for me over here. But maybe you can share a couple of those things, Gina.
Okay, so it says 1 through 9. In term 1, you're working on 1 through 9, introduction of 10, 11 through 19, and then you have a term exam.
Right. Right. And so that's very systematic through that. And then over here on the right is the supplies needed. And you have things like you'll need $1 bill. You need a pencil. You need some coins, maybe a chalkboard and a dry erase board, something similar to that. So
just
that's in the
household
beginning.
items.
Yeah,
Okay.
very simple and straightforward. The child, if they're doing any work by hand, they're moving the manipulatives around. There's not a workbook to do. If
so
you
it is
need,
still hands-on.
Yeah, if you need a notebook, they do
handy.
provide these really cool
great.
grids, and I like this size for younger kids. I had a son whose handwriting was wobbly, he called it, and he liked having that grid so he could form the numbers, and it kept it in the right place, especially later on down the road when they're adding and subtracting. Yeah, and so this book is going to count 1 through 100. By the time you get to the end, you're going to learn the symbols of adding and subtracting and equals. Those symbols. You're going to learn some money up through $1 with real pennies and nickels and dimes. You're going to, even by the time you get through, you're going to be adding double digits. Subtracting double digits. You're going to be skip counting.
Wow.
And all of this is oral work. It's all mental math.
All right, and do they use like a chalkboard or a whiteboard or anything?
You can could use that to visualize and teach the numbers. And
are the answers in there?
There are. There are answers, and they're actually, because mostly this book is for you, and so, and then in the back are the exams here, and those are very simple at this level, especially oral exams. That doesn't change until you get higher up, probably the 5th or 6th level as well. So the first test is how many are 5 cents and 4 cents. Show different ways to make 8 cents. Read the following numbers as I write them down. And so the parent writes down the number 7, 4, 6, and 2. And then write the following numbers as I say them. So by the first trimester, that's what they've learned. There's a lot of just verbal, in your head work. And if they need to use the manipulatives, then they can do so. But by that point, they're expecting them to be able to answer that in a sentence.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks simple, but I can see
you're
where
digging in really fast.
Learning.
Yeah, pretty fast. And there's a lot of oral work.
And usually with Charlotte Mason, they're expecting you to answer orally in complete sentences.
Yes.
So that's
you don't just say 5.
Really a benefit.
You say 5 cents.
Right.
Or 5 zebras, whatever you're counting.
That's very good.
Absolutely. So they're working through those numbers, and by the end, they're up to 100. And they're not just learn those numbers, but they're engaging with it and applying the numbers. And the supplies needed are things like that gridded notebook, the very large grid that we showed, and a chalkboard or the dry erase board that you mentioned, and things that you might have around the house, beans and pennies, popcorn kernels they mentioned, whatever you would like like to use.
You'll find something, right?
I mean, you're going to learn some dexterity there.
Right.
I don't know if I'd trust my kids with my popcorn. That's precious to me.
I love my popcorn too.
But this program, I think, has so much research in it. The author really went in and studied Charlotte Mason's notebooks and how she taught math, and took this, and it's from Simply Charlotte Mason Company.
Very good company.
And so she's really engaged, and it will go all the way up through into geometry.
Oh, really?
In the middle school years. So this is something
It
new.
looks really good.
It's been flying off the shelves.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so people have been waiting for it.
Yeah, and as a Charlotte Mason purist, I find this really intriguing. So, yeah.
Yep.
So where would this one go?
Yeah, what do you think? I think it would be sequential, right? And more conceptual?
Yes.
It sounds like?
So it's over here too.
Yeah.
On this side, the Saxon and Horizons, and what else is more?
Rod and Staff would be another one that would be more procedural, but it's sequential, but it's procedural too.
Abeka, Bob Jones.
Abeka, Bob Jones, yeah.
All of those. And
Spiral.
They would take up too much room.
Right.
On our table.
And then we have another program here. It's Singapore Math. Yes, this one just happens to be the Primary Math 2022.
Okay.
So there's different types of the Singapore Math. You have Math and Focus and Primary Math and
Primary Math
Dimensions.
US,
Right.
and I used it with my kids before it was US edition.
Okay.
So that was a long time ago. But this one, tell me about this.
So with the Singapore methodology, you might hear CPA or concrete to pictorial to abstract.
Okay.
And that's kind of like their hallmark.
Which we
teaching
mentioned
math.
These.
Yes, right.
You start with the concrete things.
Right. So they bring in the manipulatives. They show you through the concrete, and then they have a lot of pictorial examples, or whether you're drawing it out, or if you want to open that student book, you can kind of take a look at the visual there on some of the pages.
Yeah. So first, there's two birds, and then how many birds? We use that pictorial.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so very engaging text, and it's that workbook style for you, and you're starting with these tangible manipulatives and then moving to that.
And lots of pictorial, and then finally abstract, where again you're solving for symbols and equations.
Yeah. 5 plus 2.
Really, I think that pictorial representation is a kind of a connection between that concrete and abstract, don't you?
It's the bridge between those two, right?
Yeah.
To get from here to the numbers and the formulas.
That is one that it brings in. I think it has a great conceptual program.
And this is also a sequential mastery approach.
They also have additional practice, which is nice. So
okay.
Yeah, so they have plenty of practice if you feel your child needs that.
And you can get some review as well with the Mastery and Beyond.
Right. So the additional practice goes with each lesson or concept, and then this kind of is a cumulative review.
Okay.
Of several lessons.
You've got the Mastery and Beyond there. Okay.
Right.
All right. So that's every few lessons, then you review the concepts again.
Yes.
And so some people might opt out of that if the child's getting it.
Right. I
mean,
we do
need to reinforce that.
Exactly. We sell it in a semester set with the Master and Beyond and additional practice, right? And then of course the home instructor guide. And then if you feel like maybe you didn't use the additional practice as much, the next year, next semester, maybe
then
don't
you can
get
pick
that,
and choose a little bit.
The teacher guide is, it's just really nice it's more homeschool friendly than maybe other ones were in the past. So it kind of walks you through each step.
Yes, that one's nice and big, and it tells you exactly what to say. And I was kind of figuring things out
Back then,
way back
it wasn't
in the
as
day.
helpful, was it?
Right. Things have come a long way, and
Right.
and I need that kind of support.
Yes.
I need some
I do
guidance.
too.
And I feel very uncertain
Especially
in
if you
math.
don't feel confident in it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's something you want your kids to get right.
Right.
And understand those concepts.
And I wanted to go over what they covered really quick in the kindergarten. It covers things like shapes, comparing numbers, ordering numbers to 10, count, showing and writing numbers to 10, and then the same thing with 20, measurements, simple addition and subtraction, count to hundreds by ones and tens. And it has activities,
That's
but
all
it's
in
not
kindergarten.
right. It's not as game-based as maybe like Math and Focus. Or I
Right.
mean, not Math and Focus, I'm sorry, Math with Confidence.
Yeah.
But it does have the activities in there as well. So, so that is
And this goes over here
right.
in
'cause
this
that's sequential.
stack as well, right?
And then,
As you can see, there are a lot of the programs, newer programs that use that master,
Right.
that
more
sequential.
sequential, conceptual.
Oh,
And
what's this
one,
guy?
Yeah, so that's RightStart. Now, that's been around a while.
Yeah.
But that is also a conceptual program. And it uses games more so than, I mean,
Right.
it does have worksheets, but games are really meant to reinforce the concept.
The math card games
Right.
are really cool. And
Right.
we've got videos on this, I believe.
Yeah, we
yeah.
do. We have in-depth videos on how to use this. So.
Kathleen is showing you how to do that, and also I think she goes through
Yes,
the
that they've
abacus as
developed
well.
that abacus, so they use that a lot. And it uses like non-counting strategies so students can see like things in groups of 5s and 10s and so on. So it also covers like money, place value, subitizing, of course, addition and subtraction, finding the missing add-in, shapes, time to the hour and hour and a half, days of the week, measurements, simple fractions. All of that is in this level. So
Wow.
it's covering quite a bit.
Yeah, it's really laying a foundation in a lot of
it
different
is.
areas, isn't it? And you'll notice just the amount of teacher help here
Right.
is you really have a lot of support.
It does.
And you have different ways of getting to the
Yes.
answer, right? There's not one process.
Right.
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 So you do have the process. It is a spiral program where you're coming back again, but you also have different ways.
Right.
When you're teaching the procedure of math, there's different ways of doing it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
yeah, so that's all we brought in today, but that was a lot, wasn't it?
I think I need a math break.
But hopefully that will give folks an idea of just the wide variety of programs that are out there.
Yeah.
And what might be the best fit for their child.
Right. Because it feels kind of overwhelming now just talking through all of those things. But the nice thing is that you can really help the math fit more like a glove for your kid.
Yes.
You know, really so that it's a tool that they know how to
Right.
use.
Right.
And don't stress about
No.
it not working the
No.
first time. It doesn't, because you feel like it may not be meeting the goals, it doesn't mean necessarily that you need to throw that
Right.
thing out. It's like that 80% rule we were talking
Exactly.
about.
And sometimes math takes
earlier.
perseverance. I mean, it doesn't always come
think
easy, and it does take hard
it really
work.
does.
and
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, sometimes I'll compare it to using a recipe when I'm cooking, because when I'm learning that new recipe, the first time I'm looking at that recipe the entire time,
Right.
and back and forth, and applying it. And then as
Sure.
I use that recipe more often, I become more fluent
Right.
with that. And then eventually, hopefully, I'm able to do it without the recipe.
I love that. I love that analogy.
And then also put my own tweaks on it.
Yeah, you can
Right.
bring in a little bit of this or a little bit of that, whatever
Right.
you feel is
and
missing,
apply
right?
that recipe in different situations.
Right.
So we're applying the math in different ways.
That's really good, Ruth.
Well, that's the only way I can think about math is with cooking.